My mother-in-law asked to move in with us after losing everything. But when I refused, my husband started fighting about it. I'm a 32-year-old woman married to a 34-year-old man, and right now I'm in the middle of a huge conflict with my mother-in-law, let's call her Susan, who's 67, over her living situation. I'm using a throwaway account for this because some of my family is active on Reddit. And yes, this is long, but the context really matters. To start with some background, Susan has had a gambling problem for years, long before I ever met or married her son. It wasn't always obvious to me at first. She used to pass it off as casual bingo nights or harmless trips to the casino with friends. But over time it became clear that this wasn't just a hobby. It was a full-blown addiction. Early in my relationship with my husband, I began to learn more about her history with money. Susan had already racked up credit card debt from online poker and lied about it. At one point, she even took out a second mortgage on her house to pay off a massive gambling loss. That decision ultimately led to her divorce. My father-in-law left her over it nearly a decade ago. My husband told me that growing up, he remembered bill collectors constantly calling their house because his mom would gamble away money that was supposed to go toward utilities and basic needs. He actually developed a lifelong habit of hiding spare cash in a locked box, something he started doing as a teenager to protect his savings from her. I only learned all of this gradually. In the beginning, when we started dating, he was honest about his mom being bad with money, but I didn't realize just how serious it was until I saw it firsthand. Not long after we got married, there was an incident where Susan borrowed $2,000 from my husband's personal savings. We never saw that money again. She told him it was to pay off a medical bill she'd fallen behind on, and out of guilt, he gave it to her without telling me. I later found out there was no bill. She blew the entire amount at a riverboat casino within a week. I was livid. That's when I put my foot down and insisted we set a firm boundary. We do not give her money. My husband agreed, but it was clear he was reluctant. He has a major blind spot when it comes to her. She raised him as a single mom after the divorce, and he feels this overwhelming sense of obligation to care for her, even when she crosses major lines. I get it, wanting to help your mom. But the truth is, Susan absolutely manipulates that guilt. Over the years there have been so many incidents I honestly can't count them all. She trashed her credit taking out card after card, just to get cash advances for slot machines. She even missed our wedding rehearsal dinner because she got distracted in the hotel casino and lost track of time. I remember how shocked I was. My fiancé, now husband, tried to make excuses saying she probably just forgot the time. But later we found out she'd lost $500 that night playing blackjack instead of attending our dinner. Then there was the time she offered to watch our dog while we went on a weekend trip. When we got back late Sunday night, she wasn't at our house, and our dog was missing. We panicked. Turns out she had gone to the casino, left the back door unlocked, and our dog got out. Thankfully, a neighbor found him. That turned into one of the worst fights I've ever had with Susan. I told her she was irresponsible and that our pet could have died. But instead of apologizing, she made herself the victim, saying she just needed a little me time at the casino, and that I was overreacting because nothing bad happened. Her gambling has destroyed most of her relationships. My husband has an older brother, let's call him Bill, who cut her off 2 years ago after she stole his wife's jewelry. This happened at a family barbecue. My sister-in-law had taken off her engagement and wedding rings to help out in the kitchen. They disappeared. Later, it came out that Susan swiped them off the counter and pawned them the same day for a few $100. Bill had to go to the pawn shop and pay out of pocket to get the rings back. After that, he and his wife banned Susan from their home. Her response? Accusing them of abandoning their own mother. To this day, she still badmouths them to us, calling them dramatic and ungrateful. Given all this, you can imagine why I have strong boundaries when it comes to Susan. I've never trusted her with house keys, access to our finances, or anything remotely personal. And for a while, my husband and I were aligned on that. We even tried encouraging her to go to therapy or Gamblers Anonymous. She went to one GA meeting and came home mocking the people there, saying they were losers and that she wasn't like them. According to her, she doesn't have a problem. She genuinely believes she's one big jackpot away from fixing everything. It's delusional. You can't reason with her when she's in casino mode. Fast forward to this past month. Susan made an unbelievably reckless decision. She sold her house. The same house my husband and Bill grew up in. She claimed she wanted to sell because the market was hot and she wanted to downsize. Well, she did downsize straight into a gambling spree. She made about $180,000 from the sale since the house was mostly paid off. That money vanished in a few months. She blew it across multiple casinos, even flew to Vegas twice. When we started asking questions about where she was living, She kept things vague, saying she was staying with a friend. I didn't buy it. Eventually, we pieced together what happened and she admitted it. She's broke. No house, no savings, no backup plan. That so-called friend kicked her out when she couldn't pay rent. She made herself homeless to fund her addiction. Now she wants to move in with us. We live in a 3-bedroom house. We don't have kids. Thankfully, considering the chaos. And yes, we technically have a guest room. But I have zero interest in letting Susan live in our home. For my own sanity, I've kept her at arm's length for years. I can handle seeing her on holidays or birthdays. That's it. Even then, she usually tries to hit us up for a loan, or pushes us to join her at the casino. For the record, I don't gamble. My husband might play a friendly poker game once a year with friends, but that's it. We're not into it. I always say no to her money requests. So when Susan first asked to stay with us, just until she gets back on her feet, I said no. A hard no. I didn't sugarcoat it. Given her track record, I didn't even hesitate. My position was clear. Her gambling mess is her responsibility. She needs to figure it out, but moving into our home is not an option. We're not a rehab center. We're not an ATM. She didn't take it well. She cried, begged, yelled, guilt-tripped me. Asked if I even cared that she'd be out on the street. Pulled every emotional card she could. I stayed firm. I said we'd help her look for affordable housing or a short-term rental. I even offered, in a moment of weakness, to help cover a couple weeks at a cheap motel if needed. But she is not living under our roof. I know how that would go. She'd freeload, cause chaos, and never leave. Unfortunately, my husband disagrees. And that's where the real tension began. He feels guilty because she's his mom, and technically, she has nowhere else to go. She's burned every bridge. He insists it's just temporary, that we can set firm boundaries. No gambling, no money. But how would we even enforce that? What are we going to do? Lock her in the house? He thinks maybe having her stay with us will help her get back on track. I told him that's a fantasy. Susan doesn't want to change. She just wants access to a safety net, so she can keep doing what she does. She's only asking now because she's run out of options. We had a horrible argument last week. I told him flat out, I don't trust your mother in my house. I brought up the missing dog, the stolen rings, the money she took. All of it. I was harsh. I said his mother is a liar and a thief, and if we let her in, she'll destroy what little she has left, and possibly take us down with her. He was devastated that I called her a thief, but come on, she literally is. He accused me of bringing up the past unfairly, saying people can change. I reminded him she hasn't changed. In fact, this is the worst she's ever been. Since then, it's been a cold war between us. Susan is staying in a motel for now, though I strongly suspect my husband is secretly paying for it, which is another issue. She keeps calling him, crying about how miserable she is, painting me as cold and ungrateful, claiming she has no family support. She's very good at playing the victim. My husband has asked me 3 more times to reconsider. I keep saying no. Eventually, I told him that if he moves her in against my wishes, I'll see it as a betrayal of our marriage. He was shocked I used that word, but I needed him to understand how serious I am. If she moves in, this house will no longer feel like a safe space to me. I'll be constantly on edge. Just yesterday, I got a call from my sister-in-law, Bill's wife, the one whose rings were stolen. She normally stays out of our business, but Susan called her sobbing about how I refused to help. My sister-in-law said she understood my hesitation but still suggested I consider letting Susan stay just for a short while, since she's family and desperate. My sister-in-law was stunned. When I laid everything out for her, the truth about Susan and the chaos she brings, she was genuinely shocked. She admitted that if what I said was true, then Susan was far beyond anything she could personally handle either. Ultimately, she agreed. Having Susan move in with us would be a terrible idea. It just wouldn't work. Still, despite that validation, I've been feeling isolated. My own family fully supports my decision. My parents even joked, though not entirely without seriousness, that they'd disown me if I ever let someone like Susan into my home. They've seen enough to know this wouldn't end well. But my husband? He's deeply hurt. And to make matters worse, Susan is now spreading a narrative that paints me as some kind of cruel, heartless daughter-in-law who hates her and wants her to suffer. I know that probably makes me sound cold. And believe me, I do feel sadness about where her life has ended up. But I also believe you reap what you sow. Susan had a stable home, financial security, and every opportunity to live comfortably, and she threw it all away on gambling. She's refused every offer of real help for her addiction. My focus now is on protecting my home and my marriage from her destructive spiral. Not sacrificing myself just to keep her afloat. I'm not willing to set myself on fire to keep her warm. At this point, things between me and my husband have reached a breaking point. He's sleeping on the couch because we can't agree. He says I'm being too harsh, that I'm lacking compassion. I think he's drowning in guilt and blind to the nightmare he's inviting in. I've made it painfully clear. I will not live with his mother. If he moves her in, I will move out, probably to my parents' house. That's how serious this is. He called it cruel, said it's unfair to make him choose between his wife and his mother. But I told him straight. She created this mess, not me. I shouldn't have to burn myself down to solve it. So, am I the villain for refusing to let my mother-in-law move in after she effectively made herself homeless by selling her house to fund her gambling? That was the question. Update 1. I didn't think I'd be back with an update so soon. But things escalated with a speed and intensity one never could have predicted. Just 2 days after that post, Susan moved herself into our house, behind my back. It happened on a Monday while I was at work. Apparently, that's when my husband and Susan decided to execute their little scheme. I got home that evening, put my key into the front door, and it didn't work. For a moment, I honestly thought I was losing my mind. I tried it again and again.
No dice.
They had changed the locks. On my house. Without my knowledge. I started pounding on the door, furious and confused. And guess who opened it? Susan, smug smile and all. She chirped that she had changed the locks that day, for security reasons. I was seeing red. I pushed past her, demanding to know where my husband was. Turns out he was still driving home from work, so I got to discover this betrayal all on my own. There I stood in my own foyer, realizing that my mother-in-law had moved into our guest room, taken over the house and changed the locks, all apparently with my husband's blessing. I confronted her right there on the spot. She had already dragged her suitcases in, spread her stuff all over the guest room, and had the audacity to start rearranging furniture. When I demanded to know what the hell she was thinking, she had the nerve to tell me to calm down. She claimed she was helping by securing the house. I told her in no uncertain terms she had no right. Her smug response? That her son, my husband, had allowed it so I should take it up with him. She even called me paranoid for being upset that the locks were changed, saying she was the one who felt unsafe. The sheer gall. I reminded her loudly that this is my house too, and she has zero authority to make any changes, let alone replace the damn locks. When my husband finally arrived, things exploded. I laid into him. I told him this was the ultimate betrayal, exactly what I feared. He tried to defend himself by saying Susan was afraid after hearing about a burglary in the neighborhood and wanted to update the locks for safety. Let's be clear. Our area is perfectly safe. No such incident had occurred anywhere nearby. And even if it had, that doesn't justify changing the locks without telling me, especially when it conveniently coincides with her moving in. Eventually, he admitted it. Yes, he allowed her to move in while I was at work. He said he was going to talk to me about it later that evening, after the fact. As if that made it any better. He tried to soften the blow by claiming they had agreed on some house rules, that she'd pay rent and not cause trouble. I laughed bitterly. She was already doing whatever she pleased, and I highly doubted I'd ever see a cent. I reminded him, again, that I had told him in no uncertain terms this would be a deal breaker, that moving her in would feel like a betrayal. And he did it anyway. He got defensive, saying she had nowhere to go, that she'd be on the street. I told him that still didn't give him the right to override our marriage and lock me out of my own house. I was beyond furious. I told both of them that this situation was temporary, and I would be doing everything in my power to get her out as soon as possible. Susan rolled her eyes, which nearly made me lose it all over again. My husband pleaded with me to calm down. There's that word again, and claimed his mom was just trying to help by making the house safer. I snapped that it wasn't her place, and if he genuinely believed that excuse, he was delusional. That night was absolute hell. I barely said another word. I got myself a copy of the new key. Damn right I did. Susan initially pretended she forgot to make me one. I had to demand it, and my husband handed one over, looking rightfully ashamed. I went to the bedroom, locked the door, and screamed into a pillow. I couldn't even look at them. As of now, Susan is living in our guest room like it's hers. She's settled in, acting like she owns the place. My husband's walking on eggshells around me, pretending everything is fine. I haven't decided what my next step is. Part of me wanted to pack a bag that night and leave for my parents' place. They've made it clear I'm welcome anytime. They're fully on my side and just as horrified as I am. But for now I'm staying. Maybe out of sheer stubbornness, because I refuse to be the one forced out of my own home. I've started looking into legal advice, quietly. My husband doesn't know that yet. So this is where we are. My mother-in-law is living in my house against my will. My marriage is barely hanging on. My husband is in denial, hoping this all just blows over. I'm not okay. I'm furious and heartbroken. This is exactly what I was afraid of. I wish I had better news, but this is the raw, honest truth. To those of you who told me I wasn't wrong, thank you. You gave me the backbone to stand my ground in that moment. At least I know I'm not crazy, just trying to protect my life from someone who never respected it in the first place. Update 2. It's been less than a week since the last update. And surprise, Susan has now turned my living room into a damn gambling den. I wish I were exaggerating. A few days ago I came home early from work. Thank God I did. I walked into the house and found 5 strange men, middle-aged guys I've never seen before, gathered around my dining table playing poker. Cards, chips, drinks, cigar smoke. And who was happily dealing the cards and playing hostess? Susan. I nearly lost it right then and there. I didn't bother with pleasantries. I said, probably shouted something like, "What the hell is going on in here?" The men looked startled. Susan looked annoyed. She told me, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, that she was hosting a friendly poker night. I told her in no uncertain terms that this was not her house to be hosting anything, much less a casino night. The guys looked uncomfortable as I laid into her. Then I found out she had actually charged them an entry fee to join the game. She was running a for-profit poker night in my house, without my knowledge or consent. Susan cheerily explained that it was just to earn a little cash to contribute to rent and groceries. As if that made it okay to turn my home into an underground casino. I told the whole group the party was over, and they needed to leave immediately. Thankfully they did. One even apologized on his way out. Susan, though? She was furious. The second the door closed behind them, it turned into another full-blown screaming match. She yelled that she was just trying to help, that I should be grateful she was making an effort. I told her she was completely out of line. If I ever walked into my home again to find strangers inside, I'd call the police, no questions asked. She started shouting that she couldn't do anything right by me, that I hated her no matter what she did. I'll admit it, I lost it. I called her a parasite, a leech. I meant every word. My husband walked in right in the middle of it all. Perfect timing, of course. The poker players were gone, but Susan was crying, and I was yelling. He tried to mediate, but I immediately filled him in. To my surprise, he actually seemed shocked. He told Susan it wasn't okay to invite strangers over for poker. Finally, a hint of a spine. Susan tried to play the victim again, crying that she just wanted to contribute, that she felt guilty for freeloading. I made it clear that if she really wanted to help, she could start by not breaking house rules and turning our home into a circus. There was a lot more back and forth. I told my husband, again, that this is exactly what I feared. He looked stuck, torn between anger at her and guilt. Eventually, he told Susan that poker nights were done. No more strangers. Period. She sniffled and agreed, but kept trying to justify herself the whole time. I had to walk away before I blew up again. I went to our bedroom to cool off. Later that night, my husband and I finally had a private conversation. I told him point blank that this was exactly what I had feared from the start. His mother having no respect for boundaries. To my surprise and relief, he actually agreed that the poker night was completely out of line. I responded, "Great. So what are we going to do about it?" I made it very clear to him that this couldn't continue, and I warned him that if she pulled something like that again, I would be the one to send her packing. He promised he would speak to her and ensure nothing like that ever happened again. I told him he had better follow through because I was hanging on by a thread and dangerously close to throwing her out myself. So that's where things stood. Susan was still living with us, but now there was a tense, uneasy truce in the house. She had been sulking ever since I shut down her poker party, clearly stewing over being thwarted. I couldn't care less if she was upset. Frankly, she should be ashamed of herself. But of course she wasn't. In her mind, she was just being enterprising. And I was the villain who shut her down. I warned my husband in no uncertain terms. If even one more outrageous stunt happened, I would take immediate action. He knew I meant every word. I could see the stress and inner conflict in him, but I wasn't budging. Not this time. So now we wait and see. Honestly, I no longer know what to expect. I never imagined that my own living room could become a speakeasy right under my nose. Update 3. It's been about 2 weeks since the poker night disaster, and I've spent every day since walking on eggshells in my own home. I had really hoped things would start to settle down. We made it abundantly clear to Susan that she was not, under any circumstances, to pull another stunt like that again. For a short while, it actually seemed like she was finally behaving. No outings that I knew of, no guests coming and going. just a lot of sulking in her room and passive-aggressive TV watching. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to think maybe she'd finally gotten the message. I should have known better. Addicts like her always find another way, and sure enough, she did. This past weekend, Susan stole my husband's credit cards and went on a full-blown gambling spree. Here's how it unfolded. On Saturday, my husband noticed that one of his credit cards was missing from his wallet. First, he thought maybe he just misplaced it. But while searching, he got a text alert from the bank, one of those suspicious activity notifications. It flagged a large charge made at a casino in the next city over, about an hour away. He showed me the message and we both just stared at each other in horror. Almost immediately, we realized Susan wasn't in the house. We tried calling her cell. No answer. It didn't take a genius to figure out what had happened. So yes, we actually got in the car and drove to the casino at 10 p.m. I was furious and my husband was visibly falling apart. When we got there, we found Susan parked at a slot machine, completely zoned out, a bucket of tokens in her lap. I will never forget the look on my husband's face as he approached her. Utter heartbreak and rage. He asked her, quietly but firmly, to hand over the credit cards. Turned out she hadn't just taken one, she'd taken two. His personal Visa and a joint MasterCard we use for household expenses. At first, she tried to play dumb, mumbling that she had planned to tell him eventually. It was pathetic. Back in the car, I told her flat out that what she had done was theft, plain and simple. My husband demanded to know how much she had charged. At this point, she was sobbing, apologizing, yet still trying to justify her actions. From what we could gather, she had maxed out both cards, roughly $10,000 in total credit limits. She took cash advances, converted them to chips, and gambled away every last cent. Her excuse? She claimed she was in a desperate situation and needed the money to win back what she'd lost when she sold her house. In her twisted mind, this was some kind of heroic, last-ditch effort to hit a jackpot and pay everyone back. She genuinely tried to spin it as if she'd done this for us. She kept sobbing that she intended to repay it all once she finally hit it big. She's completely delusional. We all know that one isn't coming. Certainly not enough to cover 10 grand in stolen funds. My husband absolutely snapped. I sat back and let him explode. He told her she had betrayed his trust in a way that couldn't be undone, that he was ashamed to even call himself her son after hearing her excuses. I've never seen him so livid, or heard him speak to her like that. Susan just cried, repeating that she had no other choice and really believed she was going to hit it big. It was ugly. By the time we got back home, well past midnight, the fight continued. I made it absolutely clear that this was the final straw. I told Susan she had to leave. Not in a week, not tomorrow, first thing in the morning. She immediately burst into hysterics, saying she had nowhere to go. My husband, still raging, told her flatly that he didn't care. She should have thought about that before stealing from us. I stood by him 100%. We told her to call a friend, find somewhere, anywhere, but she couldn't stay under our roof after what she'd done. She retreated to the guest room, crying that we were heartless, that she'd never be able to make things right if we threw her out. But for me, it was already too late. The damage was done, and I knew it wasn't something we could ever recover from. After she was in her room, I sat with my husband in the living room. We were both drained, emotionally and physically. I told him calmly, but firmly, that I meant what I said. She had to go. I told him I would begin looking into the legal eviction process first thing Monday, if she didn't pack up and leave on her own. And then, I said the hardest thing I've ever had to say. I told him that if he couldn't do what needed to be done, then I couldn't stay either. I told him I couldn't live like this anymore. I would not remain married to someone who enables someone who steals from us and destroys the peace in our home. I meant every word. He didn't say much, just nodded quietly, looking utterly broken. I could tell he was devastated. This is his mother, and the truth of who she's become is breaking his heart. And while I do feel terrible for him, I also know I have to look out for myself now. So that's where we stand. As I write this, it's been 1 day since the casino incident. Susan is holed up in the guest room, and thankfully it's been silent. My husband and I have barely spoken, aside from some logistical things. We're both just emotionally spent. I don't know what he's ultimately going to decide. Honestly, I'm bracing for the worst. I still love him, but I can't live like this. I have serious decisions to make in the days ahead, and so does he. Update 4. And here we are, the final update. Unfortunately, it's not a happy ending for my marriage. It's been several days since the credit card disaster. I gave my husband space to process everything, but I also made my position crystal clear. Yesterday, we finally had the long overdue conversation about our future. I told him I needed to know right then if he was going to have his mother leave, or if I should be the one to go. He couldn't say the words, but his silence was answer enough. He just sat there, tears running down his face, saying nothing. Finally, I asked him directly, was he really choosing to keep his mother here, even if it meant losing our marriage? After a long pause, he said he was sorry, but that he couldn't abandon her. That was all I needed to hear. I nodded, told him I understood, and that I would be moving out immediately. In that moment, something inside me just shut down. I'd been preparing for this outcome for a while, and I think deep down I already knew it. I packed my things and left. There was no dramatic scene, just quiet heartbreak. He cried and begged me not to go like that, but I told him there was nothing left to say. I wished him peace, and I told him I hoped his mother someday realized what she had done. He offered a quiet, broken apology, but it didn't change anything. So here I am, writing this from my parents' house, where I'll be staying while I initiate divorce proceedings. Yes, I am divorcing him. There's no coming back from this. The paperwork will be filed within days. I've already contacted an attorney, and thankfully, I have a strong support system. My parents and friends have been unwavering in their support. Even my now former sister-in-law, the one Susan stole rings from, called me to say how sorry she was and to tell me I did the right thing. It's heartbreaking that it had to end this way, but I know I did everything I could. I gave this situation every possible chance. My husband made his choice. He couldn't enforce boundaries with his mother, even when she shattered every one of them. And Susan, she won. She got exactly what she wanted. Her son back under her roof and influence, without me there to challenge her. I doubt she even sees it that way. More likely she's just relieved I'm gone. No one to hold up a mirror to her behavior anymore. On the day I left, she actually came out of the guest room and tried to give me a tearful goodbye hug, claiming she was sorry it came to this. I declined the hug and simply told her, "Take care of your son." Those were the last words I spoke to either of them in person. Since then, I've blocked Susan's number. I'm only communicating with my ex through my lawyer. There are still some logistics to work out, property division and such, but thankfully we don't have children, which simplifies things immensely. To those of you who followed this entire saga, thank you. And I finally truly believe that now. I've lost a husband, but I've also shed an enormous weight I'd been carrying for far too long. I'm going to be okay.